Hi guys, and this is Joyce. Joyce knows who done it. So I've got another story for you. This is crazy. This is Richard Ramirez. Now you're wondering, who is Richard Ramirez? You might know him as the Night Stalker. Crazy, crazy young man. Well, he was a young man, not anymore. He was born February 29th, 1960. 29, 9 plus 2 is 11. They know about life and they know about death. Um, Richard is no longer living. He died June 7th, 2013, but his legacy will be with him forever. He was considered an American serial killer, serial rapist, and burglar. His I guess you want to say, a highly profiled home invasions. The crime spree was on that he was on really terrorized Los Angeles, and then later even the residents of San Francisco from 1984 to 1985. He was eventually captured um, and sentenced. But let's take a closer look at Richard Ramirez. Now, Richard, like I said, was born in El Paso, Texas, February 29th, 1960. And he was the youngest of Julian and Mercedes Ramirez's five children. Um, Although he was wanted, it was a very tough family. The father had been in the military, as well as he'd been a Mexican national and a former police officer in Juarez, Mexico. This had a tendency to make the father very hard, very harsh, so much so he would beat the children on a regular basis, including one time he even beat Richard so hard he hit him upside the head with a piece of furniture, giving him some sort of brain damage. I might want to even go as far as saying that, but definitely hurting him. Now, when Richard was about 12 years old, he started hanging out with one of his cousins. His cousin's name was Miguel. Now, Miguel was in the Army, and he was actually a Green Beret. And he was there during the Vietnam War. Now, can't say, was Miguel crazy already, or did he become crazy after the war with PTSD? I don't know. But he actually took Richard under his wing and started showing him pictures of Vietnamese women tied to trees, being abused, being dead, being even decapitated, that he would actually take these women and take them out into the woods and do these heinous crimes with them. Because when he was in Vietnam, they really didn't consider the women as anyone that was really relevant or important. Now, you would think that this would cause Richard to go the other direction. I don't want to deal with him. No, he was only like 10 or between 10 and 12 years old. This actually caused him to bond more with Miguel, because Miguel was showing him this slew of private pictures that he had of these women that he had abused and murdered in various different ways. So much so that Richard even began smoking marijuana when he was 10 years old, which had an influence on him. And so it was a situation where Richard really didn't want to be at home because there was a lot of abuse going on. And although his mother loved him, she wasn't a protector of him. So Richard ended up spending time with Miguel, his cousin. Now, one day, Miguel and his wife had been fighting, and it seemed to have gotten really out of hand. So much so that the husband went to the freezer where he always kept a handgun. He always said he'd like to keep it on ice. He had the gun, it was already loaded. He walked up to his wife and he shot her in the face and killed her dead. Richard was right there to see that transpire. He even remembered her falling as if it was slow motion down to the ground, and she was dead. Now, Miguel was apprehended and he went to trial, but they actually sentenced him to a mental institution because his the way he talked and the PTSD from the Vietnam War made him classified as insane. And so he went to jail. He had a 4-year sentence, is all he ended up getting. He only did 2 of those 4 years. Now, he ended up getting out of prison, and Richard began dealing with him again until Miguel started doing other crimes and offering Richard different drugs like LSD, and he found himself back incarcerated again. Now Richard is starting to get into adolescence, and he decides to go and live with his sister. He just didn't want to go home. So he lives with the sister and her husband. Well, come to find out, her husband is a true peeping Tom, and he actually would take Richard, a teenager, with him to go on these peeping Tom adventures. They'd be peeping in the windows of different women in their neighborhood and seeing what they were doing. Um, and Richard liked this. Richard was not an outgoing type of guy. So he was used to these things doing in secret. Not only was he doing peeping Tom with his brother-in-law, he also started getting into more Satanism. Now, it's kind of interesting too, because Richard's family was Catholic, and his mother took them to church all the time. And so for him to transition from Catholicism into Satanism is a little bit odd to me. It ended up that Richard finally decided that school wasn't for him, and he dropped out of Jefferson High School about the 9th grade. Now, at this point, he decides that he's going to move to California and start to stay there. He does move to California at about 22 years of age. He gets a job at a hotel, the Holiday Inn. Holiday Inns are everywhere, so you know what a Holiday Inn is. He gets a job there, and he actually has access to pass keys to rooms. So while he's working there, he's working, but also he's going in rooms and he's stealing things from different customers in the hotel. Also, still being a peeping Tom. So one night he sees this lady, he peeps through the window and sees that she's getting ready to take a shower. He lets her get in the shower, and unbeknownst to her, he comes into the room. When he comes in the room, after he looks around for anything that he can steal, he proceeds to attack this lady. He grabs her from the back. They start having this crazy wrestling match fight. She's trying to get away. He's trying to rape her. Unbeknownst to him, the husband had only stepped out of the room for a few minutes to go get a beverage and come back. The husband comes back in the room. He beats the brakes off of Richard. He beats him down all kinds of crazy ways until he's just senseless. Now, this was supposed to go to trial, but you know how many of these cases go. This didn't go to trial. Come to find out, the husband and the wife, who were the guests at Holiday Inn, did not want to press charges. They were from out of town. They didn't want to come back and forth. And so Richard basically got to slide on those charges because there was no one there to press charges. Now, excuse me, authorities, especially those authorities in California and Texas, had an inkling that something was not right with Richard. There were a couple of crimes that had some DNA, although they didn't really have DNA, but they did have fingerprints, and he had a shoe print. He wore Avia sneakers, and it was the same sneakers in both crimes where people had been raped and murdered, and they thought it might have been Richard. They weren't sure, but the MO was the same. And then on April 10th, 1984, Ramirez murdered a 9-year-old girl in the basement of a hotel he was living in. He was living at a hotel at that time, and this was in his San Francisco days. He raped the girl, he beat her, and he killed her by stabbing her to death, and then he hanged her body from a pipe in the basement. And from that DNA from that particular crime matched up with the DNA from the other crimes. And they began to say, okay, I think we've got a serial killer here. Now, in 1984, and this was about June 28th, 1984, Jenny Vicker was found brutally murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. She had been stabbed repeatedly while she was asleep in her bed, and her throat was even slashed. It was slashed so deep that it was as if he was just about to decapitate her. Now, Ramirez's fingerprints were found on the mesh screen on the window because he had no problem whether the window was in the front of the house, the back of the house, the side of the house, coming into your house. And then there was on March 17th in 1985, Ramirez attacked a 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her home in Rosemead, California. He shot her in the face with a 22 caliber gun. Um, he pulled her into the garage. However, she survived, and she was able to describe Ramirez. Unfortunately, she lived in the house with a roommate, and the roommate, once Ramirez had shot uh, Maria, thinking that she was dead, he went into the house, found the roommate, um, and went in there and attacked her and killed her. But Maria lived and was able to describe what happened. Now, Ramirez's crime spree had really gotten out of control because the day that he had attacked Maria and then killed her roommate, he also, within hours, was in this area called Rosemead, and he broke into the home, and there was a lady in that home, and he shot her twice with a 22 caliber gun, and he fled. Of course, she was pronounced dead when she arrived at the hospital. Now, the two murders and the attempted murder really got people talking out in that area of California. People had described him as curly hair, bulging eyes, wide spaced teeth. They really had kind of described him to the T. But the police were puzzled because no matter what happened, he was constantly able to get away, as if he just was playing a game with them, they felt like. Now, on March 27th, this is 1985, he entered the home of another individual and he burglarized their home in California. And it was about 2 a.m. in the morning. There was a guy named Vincent Charles Zaraza, and he was 64, and ended up that Ramirez killed him while he was asleep. He shot him in the head and killed him. His wife was hysterical. Obviously, she woke up out of her sleep, and he ended up tying her up and torturing her. And then he shot her, and then he stabbed her and cut her up with a carving knife from the kitchen, and absolutely just mutilated her body. Um, and the police came in, and they realized at that point, we have got a serial killer. Well, Richard went on with a number of murders. Now, at this point, Richard had killed 13 or 14 people. He had 13 attempted rapes, sexual assaults. He was just out of control. There just was no stopping him. And then on August 30th, 1985, Ramirez had taken a bus to Tucson, Arizona. He was going to visit his brother there. Now, he wasn't even aware that he was front page news. So he went to go visit his brother, but he'd never met with him. And he decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to go back to LA and lay low. Then on the morning of August 31st, he was out walking, and he had walked past some police who were standing by a bus. They were thinking that maybe whoever the killer was would try to flee on a bus or come in from a bus. They didn't know, but they were standing there by the bus terminal. So Richard then decides to go into a convenience store in this East LA location. And he went in there, and there was a group of elderly Mexican women who were standing around in that store. And when Ramirez came in, they started saying El Matador, El Matador, and that is the killer, the killer. They were pointing him out because there was a paper or several papers in there on the news racks that had his picture on the front page, and he didn't even know it at that time. He ended up running out the store, and people literally in that community started chasing him. Now he got a chance to see what the fear felt like. He ended up running across the Santa Ana freeway. And if you know the Santa Ana freeway, that's sort of like going to Disneyland and all of that. And he even attempted to carjack a woman, but he had been chased away by several bystanders who were pursuing him. He ended up jumping over a fence after he tried to carjack two people. However, he was eventually subdued and captured by residents of that neighborhood who literally started to beat him more about the head with a metal bar they had. They knew who this was now, they knew what he had done. So now we have the trial and the conviction. And the jury trial was set for July 28th, 1988. And this is when Richard made his first court appearance. And he looked as if he was calm and fine. And as they had said that he was going to stay in custody, he was yelling out, "Hail Satan, hail Satan." Um, it ended up that the trial began. But then, and that was July 22nd. But then it ended up on August 14th, the trial was completely interrupted. One of the jurors ended up being missing. She was supposed to be in the courtroom on that jury. She wasn't there. They couldn't find her. They finally went out to her apartment and found her shot to death. People were appalled. They were scared. They thought that some way, somehow, because Richard was talking about Satan, that he had some power over the universe or over some friend or family member he had instructed them to go out and kill her so the trial couldn't go on. Um, Evidently, that was not found to be the case. It was come to find out that it was her own boyfriend or ex-boyfriend who killed her, and then he later committed suicide his own self with that same weapon. On September 20th, 1989, the trial finally came to a conclusion, and Richard was found guilty of 13 counts of murder and 5 attempted murder trials, as well as 11 sexual assaults and 14 burglars. Unbelievable. Now, during the penalty phase, when they say what's going to happen to you, that was November 7th, 1989. He was sentenced to die in the California gas chamber. He stated actually to reporters after the death sentence, big deal. Death always went with the territory. He knew that. He was not concerned. He knew that he was going to either get killed by the police or killed by someone in their home, or in this case, the death penalty. So that didn't bother him at all. Ultimately, Richard became very ill. Richard ended up having cancer, and he ended up dying from the cancer, and he died June 7th, 2013. Never did, of course, experience the death penalty. He sat on death penalty for so long that at some point it was probably overturned because California overturned the death penalty. But now what I want to look at is Richard. What was going on with Richard Ramirez that he was so disturbed? And I'll be right back. Okay, so as I look at Richard's birthday, he was born February 29th, 1960. So February is a 2-month, 29 is 11, and 1960 is a 7. Interesting though, when I look at his natal birth chart, just to see where things are placed, he was actually very rooted and grounded. He had a stellium in Capricorn. He's an Aquarius. He didn't have a lot of water in him. Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius is what he was. So you should think that this gentleman would be traveling, making lots of money, having fine things. very broad-minded, loving freedom, space, fun, very direct to the point. Would have been great even in business. So this takes us down to his numbers, but as well as nature versus nurture in this particular case. So as I first look at his numbers, that number 2 in February says to me that if well dignified, he should have enjoyed being with a lot of people, which he had a lot of siblings, so I could see that as a child. But he would have made relationships easy. That's why he was friends with Miguel, his cousin. Miguel was the Vietnam vet with extreme insanity that murdered his wife. Why he was with his brother-in-law, who was a peeping Tom, and why he would bond with these people. That's at number 2. They like to collaborate. They like to be around people. They like the socializing aspect of life. They ordinarily would be very intuitive and very warm and kind, but if it's ill-dignified, meaning it's in the reverse, they're the total opposite. They don't like people in their business. They like to keep private. They like particular people, only those people that fit whatever their agenda is. They don't like to be around crowds. They can't even get in touch with themselves. He's got an 11 in his birthday. And remember I told you, and that's the 29. Number 11s are all about life and death, and hard lessons and learning things the hard way and being teachers for us. And now you'd say, well, being a teacher, he didn't go to college, this and that. I don't mean that. I mean that by the way they behave, they teach us how we don't want to be, or the way we don't want to have our children around particular individuals. He taught us that. His life path is an 11. So there again, he could have been someone that said, okay, I got to get in touch with me. I've got to learn about myself. I got to learn how I can rise to a higher level or be something different or be something better. No, because it is the environment that he was brought up in. His father beat him constantly. He got hit in the head at least twice. And that can cause, it's got to be some damage. I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be one on TV. But anyone taking blows to the head has to suffer some kind of a situation. And I do believe that he actually became epileptic behind those blows to the head. But having epilepsy doesn't make you a murderer. I think it was the fact that he was allowed to be around people who were not well, from his cousin Miguel to his brother-in-law, the peeping Tom, and he picked up this proclivity, this desire to say, okay, love, abuse, sex go together. He saw it in his own home with his father and mother. He saw it with his relatives and how they were treated. Miguel even killed his wife because they had an argument. You don't kill someone because you have an argument, especially around the child. That's no respect for the child. Richard was never in a safe environment. Richard never had a chance. Had his family had money, had his family had concern or care for him or even understood, they would have probably gotten him some type of help or counseling, but they did not. His environment overtook him. He does have his South Node in Pisces, which can make him dreamy, which can make him have a desire to be into some type of self-medicating situation, whether it is drugs, opioids, which are drugs, alcohol, sex. There's going to be addictions in his life, and his addiction was not just sex for the sake of sex, but it was the killing others would give him sexual arousal. That's what it would have been for Richard. Now, like I said, his natal chart doesn't show that this could be him. However, that strong Capricorn, he's got 4 signs in Capricorn. would make him really earthy, and not to say that all Capricorns feel this way, but this would help with his earthiness. His desires, earth desires, were extremely strong. So what I see for Richard, Richard was blessed or unblessed to be born in a harsh situation, and his birthday numbers show me that it was harsh. It was always going to be harsh. He never got a break. He's a 11 in his birthday day, 11 in his life path, 11, 11. The R in the Richard is a very harsh, hard R. So he was raised very hard, very harsh, and he owned that. The environment around him was hostile, to say the very least, and it was impoverished as well. And then he had this earthiness that wanted to come out through sexuality, and his sexuality was pleased when it came to dealing with the crimes that he did. There was, like I said, there's an eroticism that's tied, and that was an addiction through that Pisces in his south node that he was attached with. Guys, that's a lot, but that is Richard Ramirez. Comment, tell me what you think, and have a great day. Bye now.